And I will reveal to you who our interviewees are tonight. For the last interview in personal faith, case studies in personal faith of the summer, although it's probably does not feel like summer to you guys because school is in full swing. Most of you have been in school for a week now or more. And it's still hot outside, so it probably does still feel like summer at the same time. Quite the emotional roller coaster that you must be on. But thankfully tonight you are here. I'm thankful that you are here. It means a lot to me and everyone else around here that you are here, and that is meant. That is true. That is real. It is not just something I said. Believe it. Know it. Take it home with you. We have a few announcements about things that are coming up. We have a pantry pickup / singing at the Featherstone Assisted Living Facility just right up the street. That's where Wes Hackworth's mom, Judy, and I think another one of our members lives. We're going to do that on Saturday. I'll send out a message in the group me tomorrow and probably Friday to remind you about times. We're going to do lunch together on Saturday, and that'll be provided for you so you don't have to bring money or anything. And then on Sunday, we have a Devo. We have a Devo at the Osteen's house. We're going to go to Haley's house on Sunday, so be sure to be here Sunday evening in the p.m., and we're going to take a van out there all the way to Newcastle. So be sure to be for all of that. Good night, Siri. Sorry, I'm being a boomer right now. What else? Guys, dudes, men. Men's retreat is coming up in September, the first weekend of September on Friday and Saturday, the 5th and 6th, and that is going to be at Camp Rock Creek. Ladies, you also have Ladies' Day in September, and that's going to be the 27th. So you are not going to be left out. So these are all things that you guys get to go to, look forward to, and please attend. I'll send out more information about it, and I'll be reminding you guys and your parents. Guys, there's only a couple of y'all in here. Remind your dads. Invite your dads to come. This is for men. Your dads are men. Invite your grandpas. Invite the men in your life to this men's retreat. It's going to be great on the 5th and 6th of September. But remember, this Saturday we have service opportunity. That's going to count towards epic hours of service. So be there. And then also Devo on Sunday. So be there. Invite your parents. It's going to be awesome. Without further ado, I will unveil the identity of our final interviewees in 3, 2, 1. It is, look who it is. It's KLT and Kolton, or Kolton and Katie, as some people call them. And they are the Ballance family. You may know them from their children. They are the parents of Lucy and Emmy and Leather Noah and Real Noah. I don't know what that is. But they are also, Kolton, if you don't know this, he is one of the preaching ministers, evangelists here at Central Church of Christ. No way. Yes. So we had Bill talking about knife fights to kick us off. And now Kolton and Katie are going to round it off by talking about who knows what. But they are going to keep it within reason. But we're going to round off our case studies and personal faith quarter. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. I hope that you have learned a lot from the people's lives that they have shared with us, their walk of faith with God, what they have shared with us about their ups and downs, and what it takes to remain faithful into adulthood, to create a lifelong faithful relationship with the Lord, because this is what we want for you guys. This is what we are hoping for you guys. This is what we are putting so much time and effort for you, so that you guys can be in their shoes one day, to be mentors, to be people that younger generations look up to as triumphs of the faith. So as we dive into our interview tonight, I'm going to ask you guys just to give us a brief synopsis about who you are, maybe tell your name, because we don't really know who you guys are, where you're from, how you met, what jobs do you have, especially you, Kolton, because I'm still trying to figure this one out. But tell us just a little bit about who you are before we get into some of the questions.
Most basic.
Take off. You go.
My name is Katie Ballance. Like you said, I'm a mom of 3 children. I have
And a leather one.
That's the diaper bag, in case anyone is curious. The kids have labeled it the Leather Noah. Lucy is 4.5. Emily is just turned 3, and Noah is 3 months old. I'm married to Kolton Ballance. We've been married for going on 7 years. Our anniversary is coming up September 8th, right? I hope. September 8th. And yeah, that's me.
Funny story. our first anniversary gift. I bought it and it said September 18th.
Yeah, you
so
got it wrong.
that was a mistake.
It's okay.
Was it your fault or?
I think it was a typo.
That's what I would say.
Um,
Who are you?
I am Kolton. That's my name.
Nice to meet you.
I am a preacher. Somehow they let me do that. So I'm really just a regular person. I'm, just kind of a regular guy. Austin would call me an Astros fan.
I would.
And I concur. I am, for better or worse.
That's baseball.
Still waiting for you to go
Yep.
Don't
forward.
know where here.
But yeah, that's pretty much me. Grew up in Texas, and now here I am.
I grew up in Oklahoma, southeast Oklahoma. We're both 29 years old,
29.
in case you needed to know. We got one
Yep.
more year. One more year, and then I hear downhill from there. But I'm excited for the 30s. I think 30s is going to be awesome.
What do you want to know? What else do you want to know?
Before we get into some of the questions, how did y'all meet? If you don't mind sharing.
We might.
Okay, then that's fine. We'll get into the.
I'm joking.
Well, no, you don't
We
have
can
to.
share. We met online.
We
We'll
met
leave it
online.
Oh, that's not nearly
When
as
I
bad as
was
expecting.
no, yeah, it
But
wasn't
still.
bad. We were
Yeah.
just being silly.
We met
But
online.
we met online, and
Before we were Christians.
yeah, and then I was in college. He happened to be working in Oklahoma, and we happened to be in the same radius of our dating apps. And we clicked on there, and then he was
Swipe.
working in Stillwater.
You give so many people hope right now.
Yeah.
We are a funny story. Don't do it. Don't,
It doesn't
don't
work.
trust the system.
Yeah, the
That
system.
we are an anomaly.
8 years in, it
was
doesn't
a
work.
God thing. That's
a
all I can
failed
say.
system.
It
Unless
really
it's like
is.
Christian
Yeah.
equally yoked.
Yeah.
So
God worked with us, and
Yeah.
I think
anyway,
it was a unique case.
it was a very unique case.
So let's segue into.
No, but we met while I was in college, and then it was just a week later was Thanksgiving. I just have to say this: a week later was Thanksgiving. He was like, "So are you going home with me to meet my family?" I was like, "I don't even know you. We're strangers." Then he was my wedding date that weekend, and then the next week I went home with him for Thanksgiving and met his whole family, and then the rest was history.
That's it.
So that's the synopsis. It was 2 weeks, and we knew.
Awesome. So obviously that segues into the first question that I have been asking all of our interviewees that come in, and you briefly mentioned that you met before you were Christian. So I want you guys to share how you became Christians, because that's quite a unique story.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been talking about how the process of becoming a Christian is quite defined in Scripture and how God presents how it's done. But everyone's story is a bit unique. We've had a lot of people come in, like we had Jim and Susie Fortune last week, come in, and they've been members at Central their entire lives. So they grew up in the church, they were baptized, they became Christians at a young age. But you guys have a different background. So please share with us how you became
Yeah.
members of the Lord's church.
So yeah, it starts with me. In 2016, I was a heathen in every sense of the word. I was, when I was in high school, I was party guy, lived crazy life. As I got out of high school, it only got worse. Got in a lot of trouble, kind of in and out of jail, different things. Not a great life. And there was a time when my mom married a guy who was a member of the church, and that kind of introduced me to the church. And my mom was like, "You got to come to church with us," and I was like, "No, I don't." So I didn't, and I just stayed home. And eventually, my mom moved in. They got married, and I was kind of out on my own, living my own life. I got a job and moved in with a good friend, and just kind of lived kind of wild and crazy. Did whatever I wanted to do. Never went to church with her, even though they bugged me. Never went and spent any time with the family. Just kind of did my own thing. Well, there came a time when I spent like 3 months in jail, and that was a tough time. And when I got out, that family, they kind of took me in and helped me get back on my feet afterwards. And mind you, all of this was a really small town, like 2,000 people, which is like the size of your high school, I think. So, like, imagine your high school. That was my whole town. That was all that lived there. And so everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew what I did. Everybody knew my story. And I knew this family. They were good people. And they invited me to their big family Christmas because my mom had married into the family. I had never met them. I really didn't want to go. but my mom was going to be really mad at me if I didn't go. So I went to Christmas, and they had Christmas presents for me. They treated me like family. They were just the nicest people in the world. I was the worst. I think I yelled at a kid there and cussed him out, and did like I was a nightmare of a person. Well, that didn't ward them off. They kept pursuing a relationship with me. They took me out hunting. They took me fishing, and eventually they were like, "Hey, would you be interested in studying the Bible?" And I was like, "Yeah, I might do that." And so I showed up, first Bible study. Didn't even have a Bible. They gave me a Bible, and we sat down and they taught me about. Remember, the very first thing we talked about was Noah and the flood, and never heard the story, never even read anything about it, and so started studying and learned about faith and who God was and obedience and different things, and they taught me the gospel. They taught me about sin, and I can remember being really convicted about the life I was living and knowing I needed to change, and so one day at work, I remember eating lunch and thinking, I'm gonna go to hell. Like I've got to get my life together. And so I told my boss I felt sick, which I did, because I thought I was going to hell. And I drove home like 120 miles an hour, and I called Sterling, the guy who taught me, and said, "Hey, I need to be baptized. I'm on my way to the church now." He was like, "All right, I'll meet you there." And so I was baptized that day, and ironically, my dad was doing it all with us too, and so he was baptized too. And so that's how I became a Christian. And then it kind of leads into her story, because a few months after that, I was faithful in the church for like 3 weeks. Then I left the church, and then when I came back, I didn't come back. I moved to Oklahoma, unfaithful, kind of giving up on the church, and that's when we met. And then you can tell your side of the story.
So he was baptized in what you said, May
of
2016. He moved to Oklahoma a few months later. After he, wasn't consistent at church, he just didn't really find a place, he went back into his old life very quickly. And so then he moved to Oklahoma, and we met in October of 2016 is when we met, and then went to Thanksgiving together, told that little piece of the story. And at that point, we really didn't talk about faith or God. I think when we first
I'd really
talked on the
just kind
phone,
of given up on it.
It didn't get brought up. And I was in college, and I grew up unchurched. Or I went to churches with friends and that sort of thing, and I always had a belief in God, and I always said, "Oh yeah, I'm Christian." I just kind of claimed that, but I never acted like it. I lived a very, very worldly life as well. And so that really wasn't a topic that we had when we started dating. So that would have been October 2016. Well, then fast forward to spring of 2017, the next year, he started talking to me about kind of stopping some of our worldly living, specifically drinking alcohol. And he was very convicted about that at the time, but I didn't understand really the root of the conviction. And he was just saying to me, "I really think I'm just tired of living this way. I've been in and out of jail. I've been in trouble. And really kind of was, blaming it on his excuse was, I don't want to keep living like this because I don't want to go back to jail. Like if I'm going to go to prison over alcohol. That's so dumb." And we fought back and forth about that for probably a month, because in my mind I was like, well, I don't have a drinking problem. I'm just a college kid having fun with my friends. You're the one that got in trouble and got caught. And yeah, like it was just it was a really hard point in our relationship in the early times and before becoming Christians, because he was feeling very convicted about it. And I think because he knew that our relationship was getting so serious, and he knew what he wanted in the end.
I wanted to get back to God and get back to the church and get back to where I knew I needed to be.
So
that was like one of the first big steps I needed to make.
Was stopping the worldly living. And so that became a conversation. I eventually just threw my hands up and I said, "Fine, I love this guy. I'm going to marry him. And if this is something that's important to him, I guess I should entertain it for a little bit. It'll probably fade away in a couple months anyway." So we both stopped drinking completely. I still hung out with my friends in college a little bit here and there, but completely stopped. And then fast forward to July of that summer, we went down for his birthday's July 3rd. And we went down to visit his family and his mom and stepdad, and we were talking about spiritual things and talking about the Bible. So I don't even know how it got brought up, but we were talking about all of that, and I was saying, oh yeah, I've always been a Christian. I've always loved God and loved Jesus, and I pray and I write in a journal and this sort of stuff. But my spiritual journey is kind of like all on my own. This is like between me and God, nobody else. Although my lifestyle did not mirror anything godly, and his stepdad just kept on referring to Bible verses. Like every time I would say something, he would say, "Oh, but have you read this?" And he would just word vomit Bible. And I just thought that was so interesting because I hadn't met people.
I still remember we were sitting on the couch and he had his big old
iPad.
fat iPad and he was like, "Have you read this one?" And
Yeah.
I was like, "Don, get that thing out of her face."
I was like, man. Well, his mom said, Katie, there's this book called Muscle and a Shovel that I really think you should read. And I don't know if y'all have heard of the book, but it's just a book about somebody's conversion. And he writes basically, how to become a Christian in this book and his journey. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll read it. Sure. Well, this was on a Saturday, and I went back home to Oklahoma Sunday and went to work on Monday. I worked at a childcare all throughout college. And I was talking to the ladies I worked with because I was really good friends with all the women I worked with at this daycare. And I was like, yeah, I learned that Kolton's family, because they were always like prying me about my relationship and the boy I was with and his family. I was like, yeah, they're really big Bible thumpers. Like I had no idea it was that deep. Like they're really into it. And I thought it was really cool, but I was also very, I think, intimidated at first. And so that of course sparked conversations between Kolton and I that week. So I'm telling the ladies at work, I was like, yeah, and they told me to read something like, no, I didn't even bring up the book yet. But my boss walked by and heard me talking about his family. And my boss said, Katie, I've been meaning to give you a book, and it's called Muscle and a Shovel. And I thought, hang on, I just heard of that book. I was like, is that the book that his mom told me to read? And I texted Kolton and I said, hey, ask your mom what that book is called. And she said it was Muscle and a Shovel. And I was like, how weird. My boss just recommended it to me today. And I told my boss, I was like, man, this is spooky. I said, okay, I'll go buy the book and I'll read it. And she said, no, I have it in my car. I've been meaning to give it to you for weeks. I was like, okay, this is weird. So she brought me the book that Monday out of her car that she'd already had in her car ready for me. And mind you, there's been no conversations between his mom and my boss. So anyway, we started reading the book together. At this point, he'd moved back to Texas for work, so we were long distance. And every day we were on the phone reading through this book together. And by Friday and Saturday, I finished the book. And I was so convicted. I was shattered. I was unwell for like 2 days. And I called Kolton on Saturday night and I was like, I'm not okay. I'm going to hell. This is not good. This is like all of the answers I've been needing. And I think that I've been praying about or asking, but I didn't even know, because it just answered so many questions for me that I think I had always wanted, but didn't know how to ask or didn't even know. And so anyway, Saturday night, I was like, I need to get baptized. I really want to change. I want to change our lives. Will you do this with me? And he was like, absolutely. Already ahead of you, sis. Let's do it. And I said, okay, do I drive down to Texas? Like, I want to be baptized. He was like, no, call your boss that gave you the book and see what she tells you to do. So I called my boss that night and she said, well, you can come tonight. And it was like 10:30 at night. And I was like, no, let's just wait. Let me sleep on it. Let me wake up and make sure that like I have my head on straight and I'm not just being emotional. And she said, okay, well, here's the address to this church, to the church I go to. You can come in the morning and you can be baptized if you'd like. And I was like, okay. Woke up the next morning, still was super uneasy, still super convicted, still knew it was the right thing to do. I called him. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this church. So I went to this address, and it was like in this little bitty town called Stonewall, Oklahoma. Some of you might know. And there's less than 2,000 people there, maybe 500. That might be really small. But anyway, this little church has like 20 people. And I walk in. I had never stepped into a Church of Christ. I didn't even know the differences of churches or anything or the names. Went to the church and I saw like 4 of the women I worked with. And I was like, whoa, this is even more weird because I saw all these ladies I worked with and I instantly felt more comfortable. I was like, wow, that's why they're so nice. Like, that's why they're such good people at work. So that day I went and they had the invitation song and I went up and I just was sobbing. I still feel bad for the preacher because I'm like, I looked probably insane. Like, who is this young, crazy college girl sobbing on the front chair? They don't even have pews. But yeah, I was just sobbing, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know any of the Bible at all. He was like, okay, well, do you believe in Jesus? And I was like, yes, I've always believed in Jesus. Like, do you believe he died for your sins? I was like, yes, I've always believed that. Like, I've always said I was a Christian. And he was like, well, are you ready to make him your Lord and to turn your life around and repent of your sins? I was like, yes. Like, I'm ready. And he was like, that's all you need to know. This is the start. We'll start studying after this. I was like, but I don't know. All I know are the verses that this other book told me to go to, and I've been reading them and reading the books they're in, and that's all I know. He's like, that's okay. And so he baptized me that day. That was July 9th. So July 4th was the conversation with his mom. July 9th was my baptism. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, after that day, it was like nothing was the same. It was from there on out, just completely radical change. And that's how we became Christians.
Well, that's wonderful.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know that it's probably difficult to recall some of those memories, but I appreciate you being candid and honest with us about, to be honest, God working in your life. I think providentially just doing so many things and putting so many people in your life. And I think that's quite a lesson for most of us about maybe being that person for someone else one day. I'm sure you think about that a lot, and I'm sure that motivates you a lot. 23 minutes in for the first question. That's great.
Whoops.
Preacher and preacher's wife. So, I mean, what do you
We'll
expect?
shorten it up.
But that kind of segues us into the next question about, because both of you didn't grow up in the church, and I'm thankful that you get to raise your children in the church, which is just such a wonderful thing. But as you've been part of the Lord's body for the past decade or so, what has been your favorite thing about the church? We love to ask the interviewees this question because we want the teens to know that the church is great. The church is a wonderful place.
It's probably the same.
Go ahead.
Family.
Yeah. Elaborate.
I don't need to.
Okay.
The family.
The family. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. If you try to read my family tree or have me explain it, you'll be confused just as much as I am. But yeah, the church family. I've been very blessed with some very good people in my life, but the family that we have found in church is absolutely the greatest thing. And God's really shielded us and protected us and just got us in.
I remember when we first became Christians, the congregation we were in was, there wasn't anybody our age. They were all older. Probably the closest to us was in their 40s with kids. And
we were young 20s.
We were
like
20,
20.
And so we were just like, that's hard for Christians that age when there's nobody else their age. And I remember vividly both of us praying for friends. That may sound
It was
dumb,
really
but,
pathetic.
We prayed for friends literally every day.
It was right after
We're
we got
just want some
married.
Christian friends,
Yeah.
and God answered that prayer in so many ways. All it took was going into ministry, really. But I think that's the biggest thing is coming into the church. We left behind an entire life of family that we had to turn our backs on at times because they lived a different life. They lived, her family used to always make plans on Sundays, and we were like, sorry, like we're going to church. We're not missing that. And now her family doesn't make plans on Sundays specifically for us, I think, and they've kind of come around to it. But it's we left behind a lot. I left behind a whole lot of friends that I lived a certain way of life with, and I just had to cut it off. And so coming into the church, we gained a whole new family. I can remember becoming a Christian and sitting in the fellowship hall drinking coffee with 90-year-old Fred Johnson as a 20-year-old, and we just sit and talk about life and eat peach cobbler and drink coffee together. We had zero things in common except we were Christians, and that's all we needed. And it was really cool. So we just gained so much in the church, so much family, people that cared about us, people that helped us grow. So yeah, same thing.
That's wonderful. The church is a great thing. I think Jim mentioned last week, like if you ask him that question from day to day, it'll probably be different because there's just so many great things about the church. Yeah. But Definitely agree with the whole family aspect. From y'all's perspective, from people's perspective that move around, like if you find a church, like you move 13 hours away from your home, you can find people that you have
Oh, yeah.
nothing else in common with except for you're both, like you said, members of the Lord's body. You're saved by grace. I want to ask you though, as you began your walk as Christians in adulthood, was there ever times where it was difficult to stick to the straight and narrow? And if it was, I'm sure it was, how did you push through? And how did you, and we're going to get to in a question or two later, the idea of ministry, but how did you make it through difficult times when you were young Christians? Or even now, like you might be encountering things now that are tough.
Yeah.
I can think of like
Go ahead.
the first was right after we became Christians. I'm talking a year in. His home congregation went through. I don't know if this is where your mind immediately went, but
I didn't think about that.
I mean, it was the first huge blow. His home church went through a huge split, and it was extremely personal, extremely close to home and family, and the entire congregation that we came into and that was holding our hand as baby Christians just completely turned their backs on each other. It became really nasty. And this was lifelong friends and brothers and sisters in the pews together that left. And we were kind of somewhere floating in the middle of the whole thing because we were brand new Christians, really didn't have a lot of foundation yet, and we were just trying to remain faithful and figure it out, like how do you even be a Christian? And all of this happened. So that took a lot for us because I can remember the first couple of months after that happened, I on a Sunday morning would be crying on the way there, and I would say, do we have to go? Like, do we have to go? Because I don't want to be around these people right now. There's just fighting. I don't know. Like, it was so uneasy. Like, I left that world behind when I became a Christian to come into a body that is, there's full of peace and family and love, and that was completely stripped of that for a long time. And so anyway, that was the first really big thing. And I think God used that because through that, we kind of got so fed up with having to like be in the middle and try to figure it out on our own, and all like very, very lonely through that. He started really studying and getting interested in ministry, and in a funny way, I don't even know. We just wanted to study our Bible, really, is how it started.
I needed answers to questions.
There were big questions that came up, and we started. So that's how
I would just call preachers and bug them for hours, and they would send me books, and I would read literally whole books overnight because I wanted answers, and I would read the Bible, and I would read all kind of stuff.
He had to be at work at like 6:30 every morning. He'd wake up at 4:30 to drive an hour to be able to sit in the parking lot for an hour to study the topics that we were struggling with. Like it was intense. But I think that God used that situation to really, really refine us and like help us really deepen our roots, and also plant the seed of, okay, maybe we want to go to Bible school or learn some more. So, but to answer the question, that church split. Another for me was right after I became a Christian, doing the hard things like having hard conversations with friends and setting boundaries for myself, which looked like, not hanging out with the same people anymore and being really lonely sometimes. And, that was some hard times.
Yeah. Obviously, I told you my story. When I became a Christian, I was faithful for 3 weeks before I fell away. And then what pulled me away was I can still remember I still remember the conversation in my head of like falling away and leaving the church and leaving faithfulness, because I became a Christian. It was like a Monday or Tuesday. I don't even know. It was during the week sometime. Fast forward, you get to the very first weekend. I'm like, I'm not going to go hang out with my friends. Push through. We're good. Second week, I might go see them once, but then I'm not going to stay long. Third week, I went and I was like, what's it going to hurt to stay and hang out at the party? And so I stayed. And the first night, Friday night, I was like, not drinking tonight, not a big deal. Second night, I was like, what's one hurt, And then third night, full blown back into it, and I never went back. That was it. And I can remember the conversations in my head, like, I'm gonna stay strong, I'm gonna stay strong, but I kept going back to the same influence, the same people, the same crowd, and so that was a big thing for my faith early on. And even after we met and I came back to the church and I was restored to the church, and I can still remember some of those conversations when we got married and she moved in, and like, are we gonna hang out with these friends? Like, are we gonna do things with these people? Are we gonna go to this birthday party? Are we gonna go out to this thing? And and it was a hard conversation in my head to say no, and then it was even harder to actually tell those lifelong friends, no, I'm not coming to your birthday party, or I'm not coming to this, and then we look like the bad guy. That was hard. That was challenging for us. And it left us in a really lonely place in the church, in the middle of a church that was dealing with church split stuff, and it just kind of left us with us, and that was it. And so that was probably one of the biggest things, biggest challenges.
Yeah, definitely difficult.
Yeah.
But quite a testament that you were able to continue to say no and continue to have those difficult conversations. And I guess that kind of what you mentioned, Katie, about why the questions that you had and the desire that you had to know more answers to those questions leading you to ministry. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up from East Texas, Oklahoma area to Bear Valley, and went into ministry essentially. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when we got married, we were both gung-ho in the church, excited. She moved down to Texas. We lived with my dad for a while. That was not fun. So we rented a place and we got our own house, and we lived in it. We pretty much just had a bed, and then we bought a couch, and that was pretty much all we had. Maybe a couple of dishes, but I think we pretty much used paper plates and never used them because we just ate out anyways. So that was our life, and it was very simple. I worked in oil and gas refineries. I worked 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, usually on the night shift. I specifically wanted night shift. One, because they promoted me to, a foreman of the pipe crew or whatever, and I could still go to church on Sundays if I worked nights. So that worked well for me. I enjoyed it, made a lot of money. It was just us. We didn't have kids, so it was pretty easy to do. But it was exhausting. I was tired of the hard work. I wanted to, like you said, I would drive to work. I would literally sit in the parking lot an hour before work and read my Bible. I would put on YouTube a cappella songs because I didn't know any of the songs. I didn't grow up in the church. And so I would drive to work and sing them and learn them. That's the only way I could learn them. And I would just kind of sing my favorite ones over and over. And that's how I learned songs. And I learned to love the songs and the words. And I would sing them all day at work in my head and hum them. And so just slowly I started to fall more in love with the Bible, with the songs, with the church, with Jesus, with everything that I was learning. And anytime something frustrating happened at work, I'd be like, that's it. I'm quitting my job. I just want to study my Bible forever. That's all I want to do.
He kept coming home and saying that.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to quit and study my Bible. I was like, honey, we have
That's not
have
real
a job.
life.
She
was like, that's not real.
I was like, that's
nobody
not
does
a
that.
real thing.
And that's why I can't believe people pay me to do it. So
Anyway.
but it's that's just kind of what happened over several months, and I think it was in the fall of that year after we got married. The college minister where she was in Ada, he made a brief comment like, have you ever thought about ministry? And I was like, whatever, dude, like not a chance. And and he's like, okay, well, if you ever do, I think you and Katie would do really well. And I was like, no, that's not my cup of tea. And so that was like the first little comment. And he mentioned Sunset School of Preaching in Lubbock, and that's where he went. And we went on. Then we were in Oklahoma visiting her family, went to the church where she was at, and the preacher was a Bear Valley graduate. And he said, have you ever thought about Bear Valley or something like that? I was like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, you're not going to believe this. You just go study the Bible every day. And I was like, you're kidding. You can do that? And he was like, yeah, you can. And so that was like the first time I ever saw that as a reality. And it kept happening. I get frustrated. I still remember the day everything changed. I was reading an article on my phone from the Christian Chronicle and it was Denny Petrillo, who's the president of Bear Valley, and he was interviewed about why people don't go into ministry. And the article, I still have a picture somewhere of a green highlighted circle in the article that I texted to her at work. And it basically said, people just pursue, we live in such a culture that values doctors and lawyers and high paying careers, and they think that's success, that nobody's considering ministry as successful. Nobody views that as something that is an incredible career path. Not just a career path, but you're serving God in what you do. And it's not that you can't serve God in other things, but because those are high paying and that's the way our culture works, nobody considers ministry. And he said, we need more faithful men that are going into the church. And he told a story about a guy who was a brain surgeon who just wasn't satisfied. And he left. He was like the number 2 brain surgeon in the United States. And he said, I'm leaving it. I just want to study the Bible and preach it to people. And so he went to ministry. And that was the story he told in this article. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm so
I
done.
remember him sending it to me from
I
work.
sent her
and I
that
was
article,
Like, oh
and
boy, here we go.
And I came home.
Going
and
home.
Buckle up.
He's found ammo.
That's the first time I ever walked through the door, and I was like, we're doing it. Like there's no question. We're doing it. And
So
we're going to move forward.
we called Lance, who baptized me,
we
and
called him immediately.
he said, "Okay, I'm going to set up a trip for us. We're going to go in January." This was like December of 2018 after we got married. He said, "We're going to go in January. We're going to go visit Bear Valley. I'll fly with you. You can see the place, everything, and then you can decide." We flew to Denver, and then on the flight home, we filled out our application. We were like, "We're going." And
Well, and even at that point, I did not want to preach.
no,
I
it was
like, I'm
it was
not a
solely
preacher.
just to learn.
Not my thing.
We just wanted to learn.
I just wanted to study the Bible. That's
Yeah.
all I wanted to do. I
Yeah.
didn't know it. I had questions that weren't answered. I didn't know.
Mhm.
We've devoted our life to this, and I still don't know everything about this book. And
Well, we
I
felt
want
like we had to play catch up a lot too, because
Yeah.
we came from ground zero, no knowledge
Yeah.
of anything at all. Like I thought Old Testament, New Testament were like 2 separate bound books. Like we had no idea, so we
Yeah.
needed a lot of help.
Yeah.
So we did
we,
that,
uh,
and then we
was it.
were
I
signed up to
didn't-
go in August.
I didn't know I wanted to preach until we started raising support.
Yeah.
And churches would be like, "Yeah, we'll come visit and talk to us about school and what you're wanting to do." And they would ask me to preach, and I was like,
Preach what? How?
"What do you want me to do?" And so I'm pretty sure I hand copied a lesson. I still remember I preached from my iPhone every time I had in my notes app. I
the
had-
He would
notes.
type
Yeah,
in his notes
I'm
app.
pretty sure I copied word for word like sections of commentaries and thoughts. And there was a sermon that I had heard that I liked, and I took that idea and then just kind of copied different things. And I would remember the first time I preached it, I was like this on my iPhone and
No,
preaching
he
it
did
literally.
great.
But
He was
then,
really good.
like
It's
you know,
super-
after
yeah.
a couple of times, I kind of internalized what I wanted to say, and I just get up and start talking, and I just fell in love with preaching and communicating, what I wanted to communicate to people from Scripture, and that just only grew as we went into school.
So if you were to give a pitch, you just mentioned about Denny Petrillo's little article about why people don't go into ministry. If you were to give a pitch to some of the young men or some ladies who want to be ministers' wives one day about going into ministry, what would you say, and what advice would you give? Either direction, like maybe that's not for you, maybe that is for you. What kind of advice would you give to maybe some of the teens who are thinking about that?
Yeah.
Because I know some of them might be thinking about it. When I was their age, I was thinking about it just a little bit towards the end of my high school career.
So the big thing that comes to my mind is one, God gives everybody in the church different gifts. I was in preaching school with a lot of people who did not have any kind of public speaking gift. Some people are incredible people, and they can do a lot of good in the church, but they don't have to do it from a pulpit, and that's okay. There is a place for that. I think the Bible makes that abundantly clear. However, there are some people who have an incredible gift to communicate, and I think you would be very well served if you use that to build up the church and to serve God. And it takes time to discern and figure out. Like I said, I didn't know I wanted to preach until I started preaching, and I started trying that, and I found out that I really love this, and I enjoy communicating to people, and I feel that God has given me a gift that I want to use to build up the church. And I don't say that in an arrogant way. I just think that that's just kind of the way God works, and He gifts different people with different things, and wants us to use those in the church. So My advice would be start finding ways to serve in the church and figure out where you can serve. Plug yourself into everything possible and figure out what you just are terrible at and what you really, really do not like, and figure out what you do like. And give it time. Don't just do it one time and say, I didn't like that, never do it again. That's not really going to help you develop. I didn't know I loved preaching until I preached 7 or 8 times, and I really started to get into a groove of it, and I started to love it. And so give yourself time and try to figure out where you can plug in. And if you really fall in love with preaching and teaching and communicating, go to school and get educated. The church has made it abundantly possible for you to go get an incredible education in the Bible and learn how to communicate it. With schools like Bear Valley, I'm a Bear Valley graduate. I think it's where you should go. That's just my opinion. It's the right opinion, though, so that's okay. Don't listen to this guy.
You're not in the seat today.
Yeah, not in the seat today, bud. So
Don't worry, I didn't say anything.
I just think Bear Valley does a really good job, and I can tell you about that another time. This isn't a Bear Valley sales pitch, but
It's a ministry sales pitch.
I think plug yourself into the church, figure out where you can serve best, where your gifts are, and where God has gifted you. Really figure out where your spot is, and if you have a spot that is really gifted in communicating and preaching and teaching. Peter, I think, identified in 1 Peter 4:11 2 categories of gifts: speaking gifts and serving gifts. And if you have a speaking gift, learn how to speak it, get trained in it, get educated, and go speak to the church and build up the church. There's a lot of great ways you can do that. If you have a serving gift, plug in somewhere and serve, and get busy with it and do that. And so I will say this. One of the great things about Bear Valley is it's not just a preaching school. It's a Bible institute. They teach you the Bible. Everybody will be well served with a deeper Bible education. And so
Girls too.
last plug for Bear Valley.
Girls too.
Yeah.
The ladies can go there.
Coincidentally enough, our next Sunday morning quarter is all about finding out how to serve in the Lord's church. And Scott has given me all this stuff for you guys that you're going to be learning the next quarter about how to plug and play. One of the things he's going to be talking about is asking mentors like the people that we have had come in to be interviewed, hey, what do you do? Can I help you? How can I plug and play? Can I serve you in your service, in your ministry? So there's tons of opportunities that we're going to be offering here soon to do things like that. We are out of time. I really hate that we have to cut this off. Thank you so much for coming in to share with us about your faith journey, about your family, about your life, about what it means and what it takes to be faithful, the courage that it takes to sometimes say no to friends, and to not be unequally yoked with unbelievers who are just going to pull you down and not help you. So I really appreciate your honesty and how you were able to show us what it looks like to be faithful adults. Thank you so much. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask Kolton and Katie, please do not hesitate to go and talk to them about certain things. They're great. They're awesome. You can ask them all kinds of crazy, weird questions after. We usually have maybe like time for 1 or 2 open questions, but we've only done that on like 2 interviews because I'm terrible about getting through. But thank you guys so much for being here. Let me know if you need anything. Remember, Saturday, be here for service. I'll send out information about when to be here for service Saturday. We have a bunch of stuff. And then Sunday at the Devo. Let's go to Devo in there. Let's not be late. Thank you guys.